Hi, Rebecca. It's nice to meet
Oh,
you. So everybody, my name is Darcy Rakestraw, and I'm a communications consultant. And I'm also writing a book about burnout, which I have a lot of experience with and still trying to overcome it, if we're honest. But I was very, very lucky to meet Rebecca Lenn, I think over LinkedIn, maybe like a year and a half ago.
you slid into my LinkedIn messages.
I did. It was really quite daring of me. Anyway, I saw that you were kind of starting your own venture. You were sort of so you come from the field of organizing and comms and nonprofits and movements, and you were doing this new thing, doing astrological readings to help guide strategy. And I was like, how cool is this? Like, embracing the woo-woo, doing something different, taking your, skills, doing change-making work and applying it to a passion. So I reached out and was just so excited. Like immediately felt like a connection, and I knew this is somebody I wanted to be in community with.
Likewise.
So we thought that we would just have a conversation about everything that's going on. I think these times are tough, and they have been, and they will continue to be. And I think it's really important, especially if you're, a sensitive person or an intuitive person working in change making, working on climate change, war, all of these things that so
Yes.
many of us work on, right?
Yes.
And it's tough times. And so finding somebody that you can be in community with, whether it's just one other person or a small group of people, or at some point,
Yep.
maybe even a larger group of people. So we wanted to talk a little bit about this today. And thank you so much, Rebecca, for being my first convo.
Thank you for reaching out to me on LinkedIn. Thank you for being the gift you've been in my life over the last few months. I feel like even before the election, a lot of us in progressive movement spaces or spaces of folks who want a more just, open, and resilient world. I mean, we have been in transition. And making new connections that are life-giving, that really are food for our souls, has just been really transformative. And so, Darcy, you have been that gift to me. And I've noticed, I've been connected with new folks, other new folks too, within the last couple of months. And I feel like folks are looking for more fresh connections and folks they can co-create with and innovate with. And so it really is delightful. So
Yes.
thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. And everybody should know that Rebecca did a reading for me, which was very, very cool. I learned a lot about myself, or things that I knew, but apparently the stars know about me as well. And so I,
Darcy's chart, Darcy's chart is really badass and packs a punch. So
you know,
watch out.
I'm a little quiet, but we'll see. Well,
Aquarius.
anyway, I don't know. So where do we want to start? This is kind of going to be a freewheeling conversation, but I know
Yeah.
one thing both of us are going through, and I think this predates the election, at least I know it does for me, and probably goes back several years, if we're being
Yeah.
honest. Um,
Yes.
but this idea of grief and
Yeah.
where we're at, and it seems to me that, obviously we all know there's a lot of division, there's a lot of
Yes.
people who are very fearful for good reason. And, um, there's this whole idea that, people are looking, I think, really hungry for new and authentic ways to deal with the moment. And so I
Yes.
know you have thought a lot about grief and, throwing out old playbooks because, the world is not at all how I think we thought it would be.
We're
Um,
not in 2016 anymore.
Right, right. I mean, right. And uh, it is probably maybe predictably where it would be if we had like maybe thought about this. But I mean, when you're in the moment, when things are
exactly.
changing and shifting so rapidly
Yeah.
all around the world. And especially if you're a sensitive person doing this work, like I feel my feelings, but I actually also feel other people's feelings. Like it
Yeah.
all really impacts me. Yeah. So maybe there are others watching this. I mean, I think that some people are like just going with the flow
Yeah.
maybe not as um, personally, just like exhausted or, crying 1 minute and, just all the feels all the time. And so maybe we could talk a little bit about how each of us are dealing with that. And I know you have some amazing wisdom on this as well.
Well, I don't know how amazing it is, but I have given it a
Amazing for
lot of
me.
thought. I've given it a lot of thought. And as someone who deeply, deeply cares about soul care, I too have my limitations and vulnerabilities and sort of, in kind of seemingly intractable patterns that I kind of fall back into because I've, been in rapid response, crisis response spaces at the intersection of media and politics for 15 plus years. So I am hardwired to, in crisis moments, to just fall back into the work
Yes.
and not give myself space to time and space to really feel what I need to feel to tune back into myself, which is more than just tuning back into one's analytical mind and checking in. It's tuning into the heart, it's tuning into the body, which very much speaks a different language than what we're accustomed to as very left brain folk.
Mhm.
And so I've been thinking and feeling my way through what navigating grief looks like right now. And one, I keep coming back to, grieving and feeling what we feel, feeling the weight of the world is our full humanity speaking. And so inherent, so it really is, not to put it in a binary, but it really is an inherent good that we feel as deeply as we feel. And a lot of us don't realize that we're actually feeling others, as you said,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And even if you don't consider yourself really that much of an empath and an energetically sensitive person, I mean, our bodies are so, I mean, all of us are so interconnected with each other. And so we're holding it all together. That
Mhm.
is our full humanity speaking, for one. Um, but it's interesting. There was a former colleague of mine who talked about this like zeitgeist we're in right now, where everyone feels very compelled to tweet and post
Mhm.
your hot take online, and he called it the hot takes industrial complex. And I thought to myself, like, this is so brilliant, right? There are those of us who are being paid to have hot takes, and there are those of us who are not being paid to have hot takes, but but there's this urgency to diagnose what happened on election
Mhm.
night, to do
Mhm.
it, to diagnose what led to it, right? Um, and I think that's a very natural response among those who have been in activist and advocacy and political circles, obviously. I'm stating the obvious there. But what is not so natural for us is to hit the pause button, to kind of tune within, to give ourselves time and space to feel what we need to feel. And I really do believe that when we do that, that's actually when we get the clarity we need, not obsessively doom scrolling, not obsessively parsing through exit poll numbers and analyses and postmortems.
Mhm.
But when we tune within, that's when we get the clarity. It may not be the kind of clarity we need to say, oh, this is the direction we're going to take our foundation in. This is the direction we're going to take our organization in. This is the direction we're going to take the party in. But it's more of a clarity of purpose. It's getting back to that
Mhm.
zhuzh that it made us get into the fucking work to begin with.
Right.
That's what we really need to reconnect with. And to me, that's independent of the expectations we've attached ourselves to, between funders and different movement spaces and political expectations. But I keep coming back to that. But what's foundational?
Right.
But instead, we're in this reactive mode. Like, okay, oh,
Yes.
gotta have a hot take. Gotta come up with our own postmortem. Like we owe our followers and our clients this. We owe our members of the organization we lead this
Mhm.
particular this particular analysis of what happened. Actually, what people want at their core, at their soul core, is just to have space to feel.
Right. Yeah.
And be heard in that from that place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And, I guess I would add to that, having the space to have an authentic reaction,
Yeah.
because,
Yes.
you know, having similarly worked in, rapid response communications, right?
Yeah.
Our conditioning is to always be, you know, responding to the latest outrage
Yeah.
and, very quickly parsing out information in ways that we've always done it.
Yes.
And that conditioning keeps us from that authenticity that I think that we all are craving at this moment to figure out a way forward.
Exactly.
But it's so easy, like you were saying, to fall back into the reactive, how have we always done things? And I think I agree with you that this moment is, if we had a lesson in this moment, I think that is one of many, is, how we're working as mission-based professionals,
Yes.
kind of broken, to be honest with you. And it's driven by this false conditioning
Yeah.
that our whole society operates under.
Exactly.
But I think as change makers, we really have to rethink that, in order to really be effective and also to address our own burnout. And, you know, I've
Exactly.
told this to people all the time, working on like climate change for 20 years. And look where we're at.
Yes.
If you look back on your career, you want
Yeah.
to be able to feel like, you know, it's bearing fruit. And yes, there have been wins, no doubt. But at the same time, I'm, going to be honest that as somebody that works on these issues, I really feel like we need a total shift of narrative. And it's not about the narratives around the issues. It's about connecting our values to a wider narrative, which right now does not
Yes.
serve our values whatsoever, right? We're just constantly, and the way we work as change makers just like reinforces that. So I
Exactly.
love this conversation about taking a pause and really just kind of,
Yes.
being okay with not getting a lot done right now, to be honest with
Exactly.
you. And I know,
Exactly.
obviously, people working within organizations, there's always
Mhm.
this struggle, right? To be showing, um, impact, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can have the greatest impact by stepping away.
Yes.
I
Exactly.
think this moment is kind of revealing that.
Yes. And when we actually dare to step away from what's most familiar to us, when we shake up routine. And I'm a little bit obsessed with, everyone has this. We're now in this Mercury retrograde period. Mercury went stationed
Oh
retrograde
yes, let's
yesterday.
talk about astrology
And
too.
of
Yes.
course, all my clients are like, what do we do? And and I
Oh,
sound
and
like,
all comms feel like all comms departments
right
and
there.
every organization, there's always the one person or maybe multiples that are like, okay,
Yes.
guys, Mercury's in retrograde.
And most people associate astrology with is like they know their sun sign. And then they know that when Mercury stations retrograde, things seem to kind of quote unquote fall apart. And, there are grand misunderstandings and tech goes haywire and nothing goes as planned. There's a little bit of it's a bit of a crisis.
Yeah.
But I really do think, and not only do we have Mercury in retrograde now, but Mars is going to go retrograde starting in December. Mars is the planet of how we do the thing. It's the planet of action and drive. And so when planets go retrograde, it introduces this really I think, opportunistic or opportunity filled review period. And when we take a step back from what's familiar, we actually invite ourselves to think about, how do we break from the familiar? How do we shake things up?
Hmm.
Um, and to me, there's so many folks who are talking about how do we build resilience for the road ahead, but they're talking about it from the standpoint of how do we build our staying power, as opposed to taking a step back and actually rethinking how we do the thing, reimagining how we approach our activism, how we build power, not just between election cycles and for the sake of elections, but how do we build power overall?
Right.
Because we are back to a starting point. And then I've been obsessed about talking about the era-defining planet Pluto, which represents death, rebirth, and transformation. Much more than that. I'm oversimplifying. But she moved into the sign of Aquarius, which is the zodiac, the rebel, the visionary, the innovator of the zodiac. And the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was when there was the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, and war. And so revolution, the etymology of revolution, is going back to a starting point. And so I know all of us are feeling at our core, we are back to a starting point. Now,
Hmm.
how comfortable we are with that is where there's a lot of variability. And I think is one of the reasons why people feel this discomfort, and why they're jumping into this kind of very reactive place, and why they feel compelled to dust off the 2016
Hmm.
resistant playbooks, right? It's what's most familiar. When there's an unknown, we go back to what's most familiar. And so I totally, what you just said about kind of, taking a step back to rethink and reimagine, that's where we need to channel our energy. And I just finished rereading Timothy Snyder's book about living under tyranny. And the first rule of living under tyranny is to not obey first. And so what does that look like? And there's a part of me that feels like um, not obeying first is not letting the guy who was just elected determine our strategy, to have the first say,
Oh, I love that point.
not wake up every morning, scroll the headlines,
Right.
and then that sets us up to play all the ultimate defense. He
Right.
wants us to be on defense. He wants us
Exactly.
fucking
Exactly.
exhausted. He wants us to be exhausted.
Exactly. The system, this is how we're operating, and we have been operating.
He wants us to be hair on fire. And
Hmm.
I am not saying we don't do harm reduction work. We absolutely have to, but from a place of just pragmatic, gritty, like, okay, we know what to do to hold the line, but we need to hold the line while also reimagining how we do our
Right.
our good
A
trouble work.
balance. It cannot
Exactly.
be a 1,000% reactivity.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no there there. There's
So
no
so we can't
vision.
so we can't obey first. Obeying first is just reacting to everything, every move he makes, right? And not and just we're wasting our energy being surprised by what he's doing. We know exactly what he's going to do. He has a playbook. We know exactly, that's Project 2025. We know exactly what he's going to do. And again, I'm not saying we don't respond. It's just if that is our number one um strategy moving forward, we're gonna really exhaust ourselves.
Oh yeah.
But
Right. Oh, I love that you made that point. And when you said, about not obeying, it's really funny because it seems like most of our leaders are like, oh, okay.
yeah, yeah,
But so it's hard. Okay, so what do we in a vacuum of leadership,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
really it is the people that are going to have to,
exactly.
and us, like
Yeah,
people that work in the move, like as individuals, right? I think,
yes,
going back to this whole idea of pausing, not only what is our organization doing or what are our clients doing, but like
yeah,
how are we embodying what needs to change?
exactly,
And
exactly.
we're operating from a place where we can feel like the tactics or, I would argue, I guess, strategy is authentic and not reactive, and, reflects the values of the interconnected issues. Because,
Right.
I think what we've seen over and over is that things like, militarism,
Yeah.
you cannot decouple militarism from climate change, from,
No,
racial
no.
justice, from civil rights. It's all interconnected. And we're so used to working and operating in these siloed buckets. And, the right doesn't do that. Conservatives don't do that. For some reason, we've been, to your point about how the system wants us to operate,
Yeah.
the right has got it down in terms of they operate under a unified vision.
Right.
They're not just talking about lowering taxes or, whatever specific policy. They are kind of all working in an ecosystem of values versus siloed issues. So I think
Mm,
one of the things that we should all be thinking about is how do we reconcile that, especially given how divided people are, especially
right.
given this election on
Yeah.
issues like,
Right.
what's going on in the Middle East,
Right.
climate change, all these, threats at home, whether it's, reproductive rights or trans rights, immigrant rights, how are these things, how can we all work within an integrated strategy that presents a vision
Right.
versus, well, I work on climate change, so I'm going to
Yeah.
just work on climate change, or I, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but I
Right.
do think that part of this pause
Yeah.
should be us collectively trying to reckon with that and how we got here in the first place by being so splintered.
I agree. I agree. Brilliantly put. And I would say the first thing that comes to mind is like, we need to get comfortable with not having the answers right now. Right. And I mean, the reality is the answers are within ourselves, but they're kind of hiding under our attachments to old playbooks, old expectations, and other conditioning, right? And then
Right.
the larger reality of, living in a not so full, authentic democracy, right? And so, which we absolutely have to name, right?
Yeah.
We yet to taste a full democracy.
Right.
The other thing I'm going to say too, I have heard a lot of people talk about, well, what is the right doing that we're not doing? What do we need to replicate? And that's been an age-old kind of response, like, and that is sort of manifested in the, well, who's our Joe Rogan? We need a liberal Joe Rogan. And there's something, I understand the rationale for that, but at the same time, I'm just like, no. I think it is an inherently reactive mode to, and I think we are ceding our power to the far right in particular when we say we need to mirror them, we need to mirror their strategies. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's sufficient and adequate for us to, or even sustainable, or not a great idea for us to replicate what the right has been doing for some time. And
Plus, we
so,
don't
but
have the money.
right, well, but there's that too, right?
Right.
And then there are, deep, there are a lot of issues with, I mean, we also a lot of our movement spaces are funded by these kind of top-down funding mechanisms,
Right.
right? And so much of the sustainability of our movement spaces rely on, a select few billionaires
Right.
and foundations. And there's going to be a lot of, I'm not going to make any projections or forecasts here, but um, I think a lot of organizations are going to find themselves in a bit of a pinch next year because so many funders are still stuck in this. Oh, we need to strategize before funding, right? We need to strategize before funding. They are not they're thinking about, where their money is going, not so much the integrity of the organizations they're funding. Now, that could be a very unfair assessment. But anyway, but going back to getting comfortable with not having the answers right now. I think of and I'm gonna butcher this quote, but I think of, the Zen Buddhist uh you uh wisdom teacher, Suzuki Roshi, and he said, that he talked about the beauty of beginner's mindset.
Mm-hmm.
How in the mind of the beginner, there are many, many possibilities. In the mind of the expert, there are very few.
Mm.
And I think we have, and this is another word that's really funny, that I saw used on, LinkedIn is blowing up. LinkedIn is like very honest all of a sudden. I feel like LinkedIn used to drive me nuts because it just didn't feel at a lick, it didn't have a lick of authenticity. Folks were just masking up all the time, and now
Yeah.
my LinkedIn feed is filled with all this like gloves off wisdom, like tell all, like we got to get the truth out on the table, right? Which is wonderful. But someone had posted about the entrenchment of the consultocracy in DC, and
Mm.
how, that's created this industry of very, very rigid approaches to political strategy and policy strategy and advocacy
Mhm.
strategy.
Very, yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting. And so, but there is this industry of being a specific specialized policy expert, a campaign and political expert, and
Right.
you get so hardened in our area of expertise, and because we believe that that's most commodifiable and marketable, that we don't allow ourselves to kind of step out of that and think, okay, what if we just kind of went back to the starting point? What if we just
Yeah.
scrap everything here and just, went back into learning mode, which we absolutely need to. So there's something about the wisdom of like stepping back into beginner's mindset that I have, I mean, this is an exercise for me too. It's very hard.
Yeah, it is.
But I think a lot of us could benefit that. And I think from that, and I think everyone, not just in DC, but in other spaces as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's kind of the clarion call for the moment.
Hmm.
My lifelong clarion call has been embrace the nap, but particularly in this moment, I'm
Well,
embracing.
it's good. Do nap first. Beginner's mindset second.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think, I agree with you. And we don't have, a lot of resources. We do. There's philanthropy, obviously,
Yeah.
but I don't think nothing like the infrastructure that corporate interests have built up over decades. So, but what we
Right.
do have is our values. What we do have is our labor, and us
Yes.
working on these
Mhm.
issues, that counts for something.
Mhm.
Um, and how we can kind of take back our own power to
Yeah.
return to beginner's mind and really get aligned with who the work that we're doing and our values. It's
Yes.
kind of like uh I think we have the power to do something really amazing if we do kind of step back and shed
Yeah.
this false conditioning. I'm thinking a lot about it because I'm writing the book about it. But all of the things that we're taught and throw out those old playbooks and
Yeah.
just, kind of return to our own creativity. Obviously we're taught from a young age that productivity trumps creativity, for example. And what do we see? We see a
Yeah.
lot of, reactive. Oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but we're talking about the death of the press release for like 20 years now. And, we're still cranking out, press releases and
Yeah.
statements.
Yeah.
And there's fewer and fewer media that even, pick up what we're putting down on that front. And it's
Yeah.
like, this is the time to really kind of rethink everything. And I so appreciate having met you and, that we can just, having somebody to kind of bounce stuff off of. And I hope
Yeah.
this conversation even helps other
Exactly.
people or,
So
you know,
too. I hope
if
so too.
nothing else, if you take away nothing else from this conversation, please go take a nap. And yeah.
We're totally, you know, we're in this period of kind of stripping down the I don't know if this is the best word, but the decorum that kind of comes with and is expected of us, when for those of us who have operated in political circles and, in advocacy and policy circles, right? I think we absolutely have to open the floodgates a little bit right now, without it coming at the expense of, other people's well-being and, and emotionally policing others, right? But this is we do have to be very emotionally and spiritually honest with ourselves about where we are right now. Um, and I know a lot of people have been in touch with me and are like, I'm done with traditional advocacy and activism and politics.
Mm.
I'm done with it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I have said, honor that, honor that. Um, and so trying to whatever feels forced right now for you personally, don't do it.
I love it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so um but that's, and look, nature and the universe abhors a vacuum. So when you start decluttering, when you start kind of moving yourself out of, spaces that feel very encroaching right now, career or otherwise, that feel
Hmm.
very, in other circumstances, that feel very encroaching right now and feel push you to feel forced to do something
Right.
that doesn't feel quite aligned, once that's out of the way, you're clearing space to call something else in. And
Right.
often, often that is the clarity you need to say, this is how this is the role I'm gonna play in the revolution. And this is how I'm gonna take care of myself while being part of that.
Yeah. And I
That's
think that message definitely, especially for leaders, right? And
yeah,
people who have the privilege to sort of mark that in the sand
yeah,
and say, I'm going
yes,
to honor my needs now to the
exactly.
extent I can.
Yeah,
Imagine if leaders did this, like what
yeah,
that would model for, their
exactly.
staff.
Yes,
Just simply, a leader being authentic and saying, I'm going to take a pause right now
yes,
and,
yes.
whatever, take on strategy and,
Yeah,
take a little bit of time to process this. And, I'm sure there are organizations that I hope there are organizations doing that. Um, Either
yes.
by force or by
Yeah,
intention, because, I think a lot of people are taking intentional pauses or pauses because they don't, know what's next.
right,
Um,
right,
yeah, just modeling this for others too would be so powerful.
right, right. It really would. And there's no one size fits all, no mold, you have to fit in to do this right. There's no one right way to do it.
Right.
The only right way to do it is what feels most aligned with you. And I certainly would hope that if executive directors, co-directors of organizations in particular, do take that space and do model that for the rest of their teams, that funders would understand, that
Exactly.
those who support their work financially would understand. And
Mhm.
that's where, it speaks to some of the the ways in which uh, um funders and others that claim to support nonprofit work. That's just the hardest.
Right.
spaces we run in. I mean, that's a big challenge right now. And is one of the reasons why it's so hard for a lot of nonprofit directors to kind of, take a beat and
Yeah.
allow their teams to do the same. Because there are deliverables, like,
Deliverables. Grant
uh,
reports.
yeah, I just, I mean, that word
That
triggers so
word.
to me, right? And it's so,
It's
uh, it's tough, and of course, there will be folks who listen to this and be like, "What's the opposite?" Like, what? Well, then, if we don't have deliverables, what is that, right? But what I mean is that we're over attaching ourselves to the expectations of funders and others, that may not be conducive for the reimagining and innovative work that we need to be doing. And then, of course, what is necessary before that, which is the sacred pause, the rest, the
right.
feeling we need to feel.
Well, I think that's a great place to end this conversation. I could talk to you for hours. I mean, about
Likewise. To be continued. To
yeah.
be continued.
I mean, let us know. I'm going to put Rebecca's contact info down below and let us know what you think. Let us know if you want to be in community on this. And it was really nice talking to you all. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Darcy.